put on the IL today. The Yankees, no Giancarlo Stanton, of course, as well. They've dealt with some adversity with injury, some guys playing hurt. But before we get to all that, Joe, I have to say, we've done a lot of live shows over the years with SNY for the Mets pod. We've been in the Cadillac Club, which has been amazing. We've been around the ballpark. This is my favorite setting so far, right in front of the Apple, near a beautiful Cadillac Lyric, of course, where people have been filing in as well, and just the fans rolling in off the 7 train.
We got Grimace over there. We have the
something like that,
or something like Grimace over there. We got the Seaver statue. Yeah, what a setup! And just excited to get going here and get the Subway Series started.
So let's jump right into it. And reminder: if you're new to being at a live Mets pod, please come up and ask questions. We have a third mic. You can get on the show, grab the mic, fire away. Joe and I will hopefully have an answer for you. Joe, let's kick things off, of course, with a sticky situation. The biggest story in Mets land right now. A lot of outrage, frustration, I think, honestly, just a lot of confusion with how arbitrary these rules or lack of rules are. But the bottom line is Edwin Diaz ejected in a save situation in Chicago. And now, more importantly, because the Mets got through that and got a win and had a big road trip, now they got to figure out how to keep the winning going without their closer for 10 games, as he will not appeal. And, you've kind of talked about this a lot. It doesn't really make sense to appeal it. You don't stand much of a chance, and it kind of lines up better for the calendar to start serving it now.
Yeah, there's no reason for Edwin Diaz to appeal other than to just make a stink over being upset, I guess, because where the Mets stand right now, they obviously had the off day on Monday. They play these 2 games here with the Yankees. They're off on Thursday, and then they play 17 games in 17 days. And with the suspension that Edwin Diaz is serving, the Mets can't replace him on the roster. So they're playing a man down. If he were to file an appeal and it took a couple days to process, he's actually probably doing more of a disservice to the team than anything else. And, regardless of the Mets side of things, you're talking about just the way this is being policed just feels very arbitrary. It's obviously subjective. There has to be something. I can tell you spin rate on anyone's pitches. I could get you exit velocities, launch angles of balls hit 487 feet. But you mean to tell me that we can't figure out a way to test for these things and figure out what is illegal and what's legal? And ultimately, I understand that on the field, much like out calls and safe calls and balls and strikes, like they have to make a judgment call on the field. Right. I get that. But the suspension is just so punitive to not just the player, but to the team. So there has to be a way to, all right, you eject Edwin Diaz. He rubs his fingers on some strip. You send it to a lab, and it tells you what was on his fingers. Something has to be done here. And I know it's affecting the Mets, so we may sound a little salty here, but I think overall it's a question that nobody has an answer to.
Well, the Met fan and the Mets as a franchise have fatigue from it, and it's not just the Max Scherzer one, which I thought was the most notable one, but Drew Smith spoke about this, and Drew Smith's quote, which gained some traction, but I'm actually surprised it didn't gain more, stood out to me in terms of how you look at the system, where he goes, I didn't do anything different when it happened. I haven't done anything different since I've been back. So it tells you that, like you said, arbitrary call by the umpires. It's not like the umpire after the game is, this is the substance that was on his hand. We can't have this.
Yeah, the umpire actually said about Diaz, he goes, that was not sweat and rosin. All right, the follow-up question should be, okay, then what was it? And the answer would be, I don't know. So that's just where we are.
On top of that, you have the fact that guys have been given the opportunity to go wash their hands, and Diaz was not afforded that opportunity. And it's not that fans are obviously upset by that, but also the fact, when is that call made? Like, why are certain players allowed to do that and certain players aren't? Where it was just a quick hook for Diaz. I think everybody felt like they got sucker punched, honestly.
I saw a tweet that he got ejected. When they came back from the commercial, he was already off the field. So we had no idea that this even happened. And I believe it was Andy Martino on Baseball Night in New York yesterday. He said the difference washing hands and not is due to sticky versus tacky, and now you're getting down even more of a rabbit hole that makes this thing sound more ridiculous than it already does.
Yeah, and you also have, all the umps come over and feel the hand. They're all kind of staring at each other. It's a very weird scene.
Yeah.
The players after the game have to answer questions about it when they have just as many answers as us. Like, what is Francisco Lindor going to know about this situation, right? Like, what is Mendoza going to know about this situation? It's just very unclear. It's very frustrating. The bottom line is, the Mets are without their closer, who had turned the corner in recent weeks, it felt like. Joe, real quickly, because it is a bit of a mystery, but is there anyone or a group of guys that you think need to step up in this situation, or do the Mets have to go complete closed-by-committee approach in matchups? Because, let's be real, nobody's Edwin Diaz when he's on the top of his game.
It's got to be matchups. I mean, that's ultimately what happened. When Edwin Diaz went on the IL for shoulder impingement, they tried guys, and Adam Ottavino didn't quite get it done. Reed Garrett didn't quite get it done. So I think they just ultimately have to play matchups, and it's unfortunate that they have to deal with these 10 games without him and being down a player because obviously the Mets have a 25-man roster now, which is going to lead to maybe some interesting roster decisions. Could David Peterson get demoted after tonight's start to make room for a reliever, so you can have an extra reliever on your roster, and then he has to stay down for 2 weeks. So it just has so many ramifications that it makes it a little extra frustrating that this subjective rule has this type of penalty to it.
All right, our first question came in from YouTube. This is from Armand, who said, what will the Mets' record be after Diaz's 10-game suspension?
All right, so we got two at the Yankees, 3 at the Astros, and then the Mets start their stretch in July that I think things are pretty good. I'll go 6-4. I think the Mets can withstand this, but it's going to be imperative more now than ever that the starting pitchers give length, because when you don't have the days off afforded during this stretch here, relievers are not going to be available necessarily 2-3 days in a row. So you're going to need the starters to really get to their 100 pitches and get through 6 innings at least.
Sometimes it's just a simple answer, right, Joe? It's that either the starters give you more length, so you're not going through a bullpen that's obviously taxed now, or the offense, which we've seen explode in certain times. You're going to need more games like that, where, hey, we got an early 7-1 lead. Now we can kind of pitch a little bit more aggressively with not our top guys and get through this game. Let's get into some more positive news, of course, and that is the week that was. A good road trip for the Mets here, Joe. We've seen Francisco Lindor just thrive in the leadoff spot. Brandon Nimmo finding that power again. And J.D. Martinez. It feels like nobody can get J.D. Martinez out. I mean, you just can't really overstate how important he is to this ball club and how different they look since he's been here, and he's been such a big glue guy in the middle of it all.
What a difference having a DH makes, huh? The Mets have not.
Turns out it helps.
Yeah, the Mets have not exactly addressed designated hitter so much since it came into the National League. But J.D. Martinez is a game changer in the middle of the lineup. He breaks up Nimmo and Alonso, gives you another slugger. And the reality here is this Mets offense is performing like we thought the Mets offense was going to perform coming into the season. Now it's finally starting to click. They are the hottest team in baseball. They have the best record since the end of May in the whole sport. So the Mets are playing in ways like we hoped was possible.
I mean, how about this, Joe? Just when you look at the actual wild card standings right now, and I can't sit here and just read it all off because almost every team is involved right now. But the Mets, as we record, 37-39, a game and a half back in the wild card race. There are 5 teams that are either a game and a half back or 2.5 games back of the wild card race right now, which goes back to your original point at the top of the show. That 17-game stretch, which kind of leads towards the deadline, is going to be pivotal for this team when it comes to decision-making time. If the Mets just continue to play anywhere close to how they have over the last month, they are not going to be actual sellers at the deadline. Maybe guys that they don't view as a part of your future going forward in August with the rotation. But the Mets, I don't know if they'll be buyers, but this is just a massive stretch next 3 weeks ahead for them, how they kind of define that strategy.
It is so crucial to not just this year, obviously, which is, where we're living, but you talk about buying players or selling players. If the Mets, go into the tank over the next 3 weeks, then the conversations are going to creep back up about Pete Alonso and Luis Severino and what the Mets could do. But I'm not here for that energy right now.
No, how could you be with the way they're playing?
The way the Mets are playing, I expect they're going to keep themselves certainly in position, if not in control of one of those wild card spots, because this stretch, when you get into July, it's Washington, it's Pittsburgh, it's Miami, it's Colorado, it's Washington again, I think, and Miami. Like, July is a month that really favors the Mets on their schedule, and they've done a good job performing against some of these good and better teams. It's time for the Mets to beat up on those lesser teams.
And you have to talk about the variable that is Francisco Alvarez in this lineup. Even when he wasn't hitting during his early return, and he's completely turned the corner now, nobody could really get the guy out, and we're seeing the power with Alvarez. But just the effect he has on the team from top to bottom, whether it is the defense, the command of the pitching staff, the power element from the catching position, which, obviously there was once upon a time not too far from here that was a big part of the Mets' identity and how different it makes the team. But it feels like also the energy for such a young player, it just changes the mental makeup of this squad. It's no coincidence, Joe. They look amazing since he's been back.
No coincidence at all. And the energy, like you said, is honestly one of the really big things. I mean, after games, Brandon Nimmo's like, I love him. Like, everybody loves Francisco Alvarez. You even watch his interview on ESPN on Sunday with Eduardo Perez, and he's just smiling through everything.
He loves it.
Yeah, so he soaks up everything that New York has to offer, and, that power bat. He is a middle-of-the-order. What we talked about back when he was in Double-A, when he was in the minor leagues, Francisco Alvarez, everything about him is not just future good catcher in baseball, it is future star in this sport.
The questions keep rolling in on YouTube. Thank you, everybody that can't be here, but getting the questions in on SNY's YouTube channel. This is from Spencer Gustafson. Why is Ben Gamel the better choice than Trace Thompson or Luke Ritter? If you are a little behind on the news, Starling Marte on the IL, expected to be about a 15-day absence plus. And Ben Gamel here with the big league club, Joe. And plenty of guys hitting at the AAA level, so I think it's a fair question.
Yeah, I mean, Ben Gamel and Trace Thompson both are, and Luke Ritter, of course, are all hitting at the big league level. I think Ben Gamel has a little more professional experience and probably a better defensive player than both of those guys. So I think if you're calling up an outfielder to spend some time on the bench and, maybe spell a Tyrone Taylor temporarily, I think you could have gone either way. Like, if they call up Trace Thompson, I might have a similar reaction to calling up Ben Gamel, but I think they just wanted a left-handed bat who's probably a little more reliable defensively than Thompson or Ritter.
Joe, we hinted at the top of the show, obviously both of these teams, as much as the Yankees have had a really good season, they've struggled a little bit recently, the Mets have turned the corner, but each facing a bit of adversity coming into this series. How do you expect this two-game stretch to play out?
Doesn't it just feel like they're probably going to split? Like, it feels like the Mets and Yankees always just
even
split.
Even when the Mets aren't very
series.
good, they often split.
Yeah, I feel like it's got a split written all over it, and, I'll certainly be here hoping for that win to be tonight since we're here enjoying the game. But I expect a split, and the reality is the Yankees should be expecting a sweep here. They have the pitching matchup advantage here. It's Garrett Cole versus David Peterson.
And we'll see how far they push Cole.
And we'll see. Luis Gil has struggled a bit of late, but on paper, Garrett Cole and Luis Gil versus David Peterson and Sean Manaea.
Right, that's favorable for the Yankees.
That is a favorable matchup, so the Yankees should be coming here expecting to sweep the Mets, but the Mets bats might have something to say about that.
Yeah, and the Mets made the now looking kind of savvy move, putting Severino against the Cubs, because the Mets, as much as the fans, and we love the Subway Series. The energy here is unbelievable. The Mets needed that win against the Cubs because every National League matchup is so pivotal when you're trying to get tiebreakers for the wild card at the end of the year. I know it's weird to say in June.
No, it's huge because
they took it from the Cubs now.
Because there's no more 163. Like, there's no more playoff game like that. So it literally comes down to head-to-head tiebreakers, and whatever other tiebreakers go beyond that if you're tied there. But it comes down to tiebreakers now. So winning the National League game was more important, and from a pure matchup standpoint, Luis Severino fit much better facing the Cubs than he probably did facing the Yankees, though he did say he will do everything in his power to make sure he's pitching at Yankee Stadium next month.
And it probably means a little something to Severino having that bounce back year right now. We'll get back to Severino in a little bit when we talk about potential Mets All-Stars. We do like to turn the clock back a little bit on the Mets pod. Favorite Subway Series memory, Joe? Is there one where you've actually been at the game, or just one in general?
I don't think I've ever been to a Subway Series. No, I actually did go to a Subway Series game. Nothing much happened. The Mets won, but it wasn't like a memorable
thriller
game. Yeah. I mean, how do you not just go to David Wright-Off, Mariano Rivera?
It's the layup.
I mean, it's the
2006,
layup.
great season.
It's the layup. You put the ball on the tee, I'm going to hit it. But that certainly is a memory that you see on highlights all the time.
I think the strangest one is Meta Rosario's walk-off at Yankee Stadium into an empty, obviously, the COVID season.
And weren't they like the home team or something weird
it was
like
a walk-off.
that? Yeah, but like it was at Yankee Stadium, but the Mets were home or something like that, I think.
Yes, because of the way the schedule played. It was very odd times.
Yeah, very bizarre.
I rewatched that one today.
Took out a cardboard cutout on his way home.
Very, very strange. All right, let's get to the All-Star conversation because obviously that voting is underway. You brought up Severino having a bounce-back season. But the guy we got to talk about, Joe, because it feels like he's been snubbed. He definitely gets snubbed for the Gold Glove before. Francisco Lindor has just been unbelievable. It's not even just that we often go, 30-day stretch. Since he's been in the leadoff spot, which has been longer than 30 days, the power from Lindor, the base running, he's going to bring his defense even when he's struggling at the plate. But we've talked about this, Joe. The approach has been fantastic from Lindor in the leadoff spot.
The approach is there. He's willing to take walks. And we talked about this on the show last week or the week before. When he's hitting third, I don't know if he puts more pressure on himself that he has to be that run producer. I think in the leadoff spot, he looks more natural. He's smiling. He's having fun. And that's the Francisco Lindor that you saw in 2022 when the Mets were a contender. It's smiling. It's happy. Obviously, he hits for the power. The defense never wavers. He should be winning a Gold Glove basically every year. What he does at shortstop and what he means to his team is a lot. And at this point, considering how he started April and the beginning of May, we're having a conversation that Francisco Lindor should be an all-star, and he really should, especially with, Mookie Betts on the shelf. Like, who's next up? I mean, Ellie De La Cruz having, obviously, a good year, but I think Francisco Lindor should be the replacement starting shortstop.
You're listening to the Mets Pod, presented by Tri-State Cadillac. Subscribe to the Mets Pod at Apple Podcasts, Spotify. You can watch every episode on SNY's YouTube channel. All right, Joe, let's go down on the farm like we always do. And there's been a lot of movement at second base for the Mets this year. Jeff McNeil's been struggling. He is in the lineup tonight. Obviously, Jose Iglesias has had some moments there, and Mets fans want to see him play more. But we have to talk about Luisangel Acuna, who could be playing second base for the big league club at some point this season, Joe. And he had a slow start to the season, but he's kind of picked it up recently.
Yeah, he's picked it up. I mean, really, statistically, from May 1st on, he's hitting over 290. So he is getting there. The thing about Acuna, and it's just unfortunate who his brother is, it kind of sets some unrealistic expectations.
He's not hitting 30 home runs.
No, power is not a part of Luisangel Acuna's game, but what has made a big stride for him, especially in the month of June where he's hitting over 310, chasing less, making better contact, harder contact. He's starting to hit line drives, which is really when he's at his best. He's spraying line drives gap to gap, and he's someone that is obviously a dynamic base runner that he could be a 30, 40 stolen base guy at the next level if he's able to get on base enough to, put himself in position for that. And that's something that this team lacks. And if Jeff McNeil doesn't turn it around and, if you do give Jose Iglesias some run and the more run he gets, I think that would kind of even out a bit for him statistically. I think the Mets will be hard-pressed, especially as they make this push for a playoff spot, to not give a look to someone like Acuna in the second half.
Is he a plus glove in the big leagues, Joe?
Oh, yeah. I mean, he's going to be a good fielder. He plays all three positions right now at Syracuse, up the middle, short, second, center. Most scouts have believed for quite some time he's better in the dirt than in the grass, and second base is more natural for him than shortstop. So I think him and Lindor could be a really smooth double play combo.
The questions keep rolling in on YouTube, and of course, if you're here and have a question,
please,
come on over. The third mic, come up. Don't be a stranger. Joe, you released a new prospect list, 30. Top 30 for SNY. This one from YouTube, John Infante. For Joe, out of your prospect list, who missed the cut that we should keep an eye out for the future? 30's a lot, Joe.
Yeah.
So is there actually somebody this time where you're like, man, I hate that I left him off the list?
So there was a catcher that the Mets signed 2 international signings ago, Daiverson, Gutierrez, who got off to a slow start in his first year in the Dominican Summer League and much better this year. He was someone that, has some raw power, a solid receiver, got some arm strength, and obviously I believe he's still 18 years old, so obviously a kid, but he would be one that just missed the list. And the system's improving. There's no way around it, which you could go check out that top 30 list at sny.tv. And, this is a system that's on an upward trajectory, and we have the MLB draft coming here in less than 3 weeks, so there's going to be some more talent infused into the system.
All right, just because we're at Citi Field doesn't mean we're going to stop our scoreboard predictions. Let's quickly review ours from last week, Joe. Over-under push was set at 5 for J.D. Martinez. Hits, we both went over. He pushed. Landed right on 5 hits, no points for us. Over-under push was set at 1 for Pete Alonso home runs. We both went over. He pushed. No points awarded. Over-under push was set at 1 for Francisco Alvarez home runs. Joe, you went under. I pushed. He hit 2. Big week for Alvarez. Brutal week for us on the scoreboard. Okay. Over-under push was set at 2 for Mets starters going at least 6 innings. You went over, Joe. I pushed. They did go over. They had 3 starters go 6 innings. Thank God somebody got a point. Good job, Joe. Over-under push was 3 for Starling Marte starts, who's unfortunately on the IL now. We both pushed. He went over. Maybe they should have pushed, and maybe that knee would have held up a little bit.
Maybe.
All right, the last one, over-under push was at 3 for Mets wins. You were feeling confident, Joe. You went over. I pushed. They won 3. A point to me. We tied for the week. You have the season lead 25-22. So let's get some all Subway Series edition predictions for the 2-game stretch. Joe, I'll let you take the start. Yes or no? Will J.D. Martinez homer in this series?
He's going to homer tonight off Garrett Cole.
All right, you heard it there first. I will say yes as well. J.D. Martinez right now swinging a hot bat, and it feels like he's going to be ready to roll. All right, yes or no? Will Pete Alonso homer in this series? Joe, I'll go no right now. It's been kind of up and down for Pete in terms of power. I think he's definitely looked better recently. It's only 2 games. If you're a betting man, the odds will favor you very much if you go no.
I'm going to side with you. I'm going to say no for Pete, but his bat is starting to turn around too. We talk about JD and all these other guys. Let's not forget to mention that the polar bear is starting to find his stroke a little bit too.
Our producer got very home run happy. Shout out to Jeff, and he said, "Will Francisco Alvarez homer in the series?" Joe, we know Alvarez loves the moment.
I'd be almost surprised if he didn't. Like you said, he is up for this moment, and I could just see one of those second deckers off one of the Yankees relievers, like, maybe Phil Bickford or Michael Tonkin, former Met friends, hanging out in the Yankees bullpen.
Let me ask you this. You think he starts both days?
That's a good question.
Because I'll go no if we think Luis Torrens is going to get a start. And it's a revenge game for Torrens.
Yeah, revenge game for Torrens, who I'm based on what Jose Trevino is doing behind the plate, I think some Yankee fans would like to see Luis Torrens in a Yankee uniform right now.
And they are out and loud right now. All right, will Mark Vientos homer in this series? Joe, I will say no for Vientos. I think the ball he hit against the Cubs, though, still didn't land.
450 feet, 110 off the bat. Like, that's his thing. So I'll go no as well. I mean, it's a homer-happy scoreboard here, but I can't say everybody's going to homer.
All right, let's pivot here. Will this series see any extra innings?
Extra innings?
Just like it usually does.
Yeah, I'll go no, just because I feel like extra innings are not overly common, so I'll just say we could get through 2 games without one.
I'll go yes. It's Mets-Yankees. It feels like they always find a way. Over-under push at 2 for Francisco Lindor hits, Joe.
I'll push. I think Lindor will get a couple hits, and, hey, maybe one of them's a homer. Why not? But I'll push at 2.
I'll go over for Lindor. I think he can get 3 across the 2 games, especially the leadoff spot. He obviously gets a lot of at-bats with the way the Mets have been hitting, getting on base. Over push is set at 0. Mets starters going at least 6 innings. Joe, I will actually take the push here. It's David Peterson and Sean Manaea on the mound. If somebody's going to do it, I would think it's going to be Peterson.
Yeah,
I'm not gonna take it though.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'll push too. It feels tough with this Yankees offense, even though it hasn't been rolling the way it should.
No Stanton, but still.
I mean, Judge and Soto could really, really do it.
All right, our last one here, Joe. Over under push is set at 1, of course, for Mets wins.
Push. I said it just a couple minutes ago. I can't change my tune. I think this screams split, and we'll just see you in the Bronx next month.
All right, as we always do, let's close out the show with some mailbag questions. We already both predicted a split. No home run for Vientos. All right, we're going to bring on a live question.
Welcome
there
to
we
a
go.
Live show.
With an incredible Grimace shirt.
Yeah. All right, what's going on, guys?
How
Big
are
fan
you,
of the show.
What's your name?
My name's Peyton.
All right, Peyton. What's up, man?
So I want to ask you guys, when do you think Jose Butto and Christian Scott will get called back up? I feel like they are, pivotal pieces of the rotation.
Very soon, Joe, right?
So the plan was to have Christian Scott back up to start the 17-game stretch. Kind of tough to do that playing a player down now with the Edwin Diaz suspension, but I think both of them are trending in the right direction at AAA, and Christian Scott really doesn't need to trend in a direction. He's big league ready. They're just trying to manage his innings because as the Mets pursue a playoff push, you want Christian Scott pitching in September. And if he was just here the whole time pitching, it would be great to see him, but then the Mets would shut him down in September, and kind of what good is that? But I think between Butto and Scott, you're going to see a bunch of them here, especially as we transition into July and August.
I think the big question is, too, I like that you brought up Butto. Butto didn't have a lot of blow-up starts while he was here, while some guys have. Mets fans are kind of looking around like, why would we not have Butto back up? At least we know the consistency we're getting with him. Joe, do you think when he comes back up, is there any chance he could actually hold down a spot? Because they want Scott here for the big stretch.
I think it's possible, yeah, especially if they go through some stretches with the 6-man. Kodai Senga may potentially start a rehab assignment next week, so he's coming back. And when Senga's around, you kind of are in mostly a 6-man rotation, so that allows the opportunity for that.
And I got the Grimace here, the purple shirt, obviously for Grimace as well.
Oh,
right?
yeah, of course.
Awesome.
I mean, that's what Amazon Prime was made for.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
Payne,
Right.
thank you, man.
Thank you, guys.
Appreciate it.
The questions keep rolling in.
How you
Oh,
guys
look at
doing,
this
guys. How you
Look at
doing,
that.
guys?
It's
How we doing?
great
The
hat.
Who Man in the building.
There he is.
All right.
Yes. My question is, knowing that Diaz is down, who do you feel that's going to step up and do a good job, or at least
They all
a close job?
It's
in the ninth inning?
It's got to be an all-hands-on-deck approach. I don't think the Mets have a backup closer right now, which perhaps is something that, if the Mets keep playing the way they do, that's something that they want to look at come trade deadline time.
Yes.
But for now, the ninth inning, if the Mets are in a safe situation, it's got to come down to what's the best matchup on that given day, and that's the guy that has to get the job done.
Who do you want to get the ball?
Yeah.
Say the Mets are up 2-1 in the ninth tonight. Who gets the ball?
Rivera. Let
Yeah,
him come out of retirement.
Bring him back for the
Bring
Mets.
him out of retirement.
Yeah.
The best man up. I mean, whoever's
Yeah,
gets the
matchups.
spot.
It's gonna be matchups
Exactly,
based.
and I guess that's exactly what they're going to do in the ninth inning anyway,
Yeah,
depending on who's coming to the plate.
Yeah, it's going to be a tricky call. I think it's going to be all matchups based, though. They're going to be very analytical while Diaz is down.
And they should be. I
Right.
mean,
Yeah,
that's
it's the
what it
right
comes down
approach.
to is you have to
Garrett?
put your. I mean,
Drew
Reed Garrett.
Smith?
If Reed Garrett can locate that splitter, because that's the thing.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you. That's the thing about Reed Garrett. He obviously was so great early in the season. Now he's missing too much with that splitter, and now hitters aren't chasing.
We almost lost him on the way in.
We almost
but he
lost
made it.
Cowbell Man. We need Cowbell Man.
All right. My name is Eddie, the Cowbell Man.
Yeah.
You basically don't need an introduction.
Yeah, this is Cowbell Man. What?
Okay, my question to you guys is, when do you think there's a timetable for Senga to get back into rotation?
So as I just said a minute ago, he's throwing another live this week, and if all goes well with that live, he's going to start a rehab assignment. But given the fact that Senga hasn't pitched since last year, it's going to be a while. I mean, you're talking probably 4 to 5 rehab starts. You stretch them out over 5-6 days. I mean, you're at least a month away, easy. But if he can keep on this trajectory, I know Mets fans will hate to hear this. I don't think there's a better trade deadline acquisition that the Mets can make this year than getting Kodai Senga back.
You had to go there.
I had to go there,
Yeah.
but I don't know if there is. You can't do better than that. But I would say certainly after the All-Star break, and if things go well, maybe it's prior to August 1st. It should be in that range, I would
I
think.
think so. Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah.
Cowbell Man,
Cowbell Man,
appreciate
you're
you.
a legend.
Thanks
I
for coming up.
appreciate you.
All right, thank you.
All right, we're going to keep the mailbag rolling. We got a question here from YouTube, Joe. This is at Drew Smith fan.
All right, we got
that's
one.
good to see.
Yeah.
Drew Smith has taken a lot of heat before, and we try to defend Drew Smith.
Yeah.
This is his biggest fan.
Got it.
Hey, guys, a bit of a fun question. Let's say the Mets, Phillies, and Braves all finish the season with a 99-63 record in the division, and the only way to determine the NL East champion is to have a triple threat ladder match between Mr. Met, Philly Fanatic, and Blooper, with the championship title hanging above a ladder. Who do you guys see coming out on top, and which mascot will finish their team's story? Joe, we know the variable here. Grimace interferes with the match, and Mr. Met wins.
Mr. Met wins because you have both the Philly Fanatic and Blooper on the ladder. Grimace slides under the bottom rope. He pushes that thing over. Those guys go flying. They hit the top rope on their way out, and Mr. Met just takes that slow climb and pulls down that title.
Yeah, the Mets have basically a stable of mascots right now. A good place to be. Another one. This is from a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. Thank you, TG from NJ. What a difference a few weeks make with the way the Mets have been playing lately and how jumbled up the NL wildcard race is. Do you think it almost makes more sense to hold firm, keep this roster intact, and see what happens, especially if the trade return on a lot of these expiring deals wouldn't bring back much anyways? We've seen in recent seasons with the Phillies, Diamondbacks, all it takes is for a team to get hot at the right time, get into the postseason, and anything can happen. Joe, that's going to be the big talking point. Because, listen, if the Mets are in the wildcard race, there's no way they're going to trade J.D. Martinez and Pete Alonso. Maybe you could see a Manaea moved or someone like that. But the question is, if they're a couple games out and it's been uneven and you're dealing with some injuries, basically, what is the line?
It's really tough. It's honestly a tough decision for David Stearns, and I'm glad I don't have to make it. But I think it's going to be a lot based on the feel of how this team is playing over the next month, because you really – I know the deadline is July 30th, but you really got to make this decision by the All-Star break or so. It's not something that you can, wait until July 28th and go, all right, well, I guess we're going to start selling and try to make all these moves in a 48-hour span. But when you mention a guy like Manaea or a guy like Jose Quintana, I think something to think about as we move forward in baseball and this modern game, I think we're going to evolve past the days of you are a buyer or a seller. There is no reason why in the right scenario you can't do a little bit of both. I know pitching depth, you want to be careful with that, but if everyone stays healthy, Senga comes back, Scott comes back, Butto is someone as an option, and you could get a prospect for a Quintana, and you think Christian Scott is actually better than Quintana, then you can kind of do the best of both worlds. But it is a tricky thing with the clubhouse dynamic is really what you have to worry about.
Joe,
there.
I think the playoff structure really is kind of what you're alluding to now, where, okay, you have maybe a handful of teams that are great, right? That they will take on rentals, they will pay a decent price because they say, we are aligned to win a championship this year. We'll do whatever it takes. You look at the standings right now, you think the Dodgers, if they needed to make that move, the Phillies, if they needed to make that move, the Yankees should be a team that honestly
they should be very aggressive.
The Yankees should be very, very aggressive. But then there's this giant stretch of teams. I mean, literally, look at the standings that are all hovering around the wild card that, hey, they might send out a guy that they don't. He's going to get to free agency. We're not going to be able to retain him. He's not a superstar for us. We're going to send him out, but maybe we'll go get a reliever with 2 years of control. I think that's what's changed this deadline situation, Joe, that I don't know if it'll be more activity, but it's just different activity.
It's going to be different activity. I would agree with that. And I think where the Mets stand is, if they're in a position, like you said, they're a couple games out, or they're one of the wild card teams, which I think, based on their July schedule, is a distinct possibility. I still don't think you're going to see one of those all-in deadlines. Even if the Mets are in control of a wild card spot, I still think David Stearns and this organization wants to hang on to the top prospects in their system. And I think you'll see moves at the margins, add to the bullpen, maybe add a fourth outfielder, maybe I guess a second baseman. But I think they got Luisangel Acuna for that. So that I don't think it would be a crazy active trade deadline for the Mets, but I think it would be a disservice to the players in that locker room that bounce back from what was such a rough May to put themselves in position to be a playoff team to not give them something.
Sticking with the theme of player acquisitions, this is from Matty Lunds on YouTube. With Steve Cohen's money, can the Mets get players at the trade deadline to help us now without giving up prospects? What Matty's basically alluding to is, can they take on a contract that a team wants to offload that most teams wouldn't consider sending an actual asset to take on that money? Number one, I love the idea.
Yeah.
This is something that is very, very can be common in maybe hockey, really hard salary cap leagues. But the question is, Joe, what players are out there that fit that DNA? Because then you are taking on bad money. That's the question.
Yeah, bad money, and how long's the bad money?
Term is huge.
It was on a smaller scale, but the Mets took on Chris Flexen's money to get Trevor Gott, if you remember that, and obviously Trevor Gott didn't quite work out here.
They didn't keep Flexen.
And they picked him up to cut him to just basically so they could get him for nothing.
It was a dud.
Yeah, so that was the objective of that, and with Steve Cohen's dollars and his willingness to spend them, obviously last deadline he used them to purchase prospects. There's no reason why he can't be on the other side of that coin. If there is someone's money that a team wants to get rid of in a deal that can lower the cost and prospect capital, that's something that I think he would definitely consider.
I think where the Mets have the advantage is already what we saw last year. If there's a player that is owed a lot of money, but the Mets can kind of beef up the return by paying down the contract, the Mets are willing to do that. We saw it with Scherzer. We saw it with Verlander. I know the problem is he hasn't been an effective player this year. A lot of people are wondering this about Jeff McNeil right now, Joe, because he's owed money for a couple years, and nobody's going to take on that contract unless Steve Cohen pays the dime. And honestly, he just needs to turn it around in general.
Yeah, Jeff McNeil, and the Mets are giving him every opportunity to turn it around. I know Mets fans are getting frustrated seeing his name in the lineup based on how he's playing, but they have to exhaust all opportunities with Jeff McNeil because at the end of the day, I know he hasn't been the same hitter, but it was just a year and a half ago this guy won the batting title. So it's not as if you don't really forget to hit overnight, but it's been a bit of a rough patch here for Jeff McNeil.
And a big J.D. Davis fan.
Big J.D. Davis Yankee fan, starting first baseman for the New York Yankees. Who would have thought?
Yeah, not me. Not where I'd want to be. But anyways, next question here from Green Machine 82. With Marte out for probably a month, who do you think gets more time in right field, Stewart or Taylor, or do they platoon based on matchups?
I think it's going to be largely a platoon where they split time, and I like Tyrone Taylor. I think he brings a little more to the table. He's certainly a much better defensive player than DJ Stewart is. And they both haven't been hitting well of late, but I don't know. I just feel like Tyrone Taylor gives a little bit of a better at-bat, too. So, man, it would be nice if Drew Gilbert were healthy. We were talking about that before the show started, and, obviously Marte's going to be out for quite some time. Man, it would have been imagine how electric it would be here if this was the Major League debut of Drew Gilbert tonight. Real shame.
Yeah, the way the injuries have hit the Mets farm system is not timed up well for this team at all. Because we were talking about, hey, maybe July we could see someone like Gilbert or Acuna. Acuna still on track to maybe be here at some point of this season. Gilbert's got
to get back in the game action.
Yeah, they've really, he's going to need a lot of time too. All right, let's get back to, of course, the mailbag questions here. I actually got one from Twitter here, Joe. This is from Dale's Pale Ale, who usually sends us some good stuff. Who are the players to be traded if it's a measured buy and sell situation? So you've hinted at the fact that there's this hybrid situation for a lot of teams. I brought up Minaya. There's been rumors about Minaya. Is there someone else, Joe, that you think, hey, they can kind of fill that void internally if they move on?
Minaya, Jose Quintana, Jeff McNeil, and maybe even in the bullpen. Like, what if, I don't want to, run anyone out the door, but what if somebody wanted Sean Reed-Foley from you, and you could trade Sean Reed-Foley for something, and then you acquire a different reliever that you like better than Sean Reed-Foley somewhere else, and it kind of almost balances itself out. But David Stearns is going to have an opportunity to be as creative, I think, as he wants to be.
We had a two-parter from our 5-star Apple review that we got to the first part before. TG from NJ also asked a prospect question for Joe. What's your take on Boston Baro, the Mets' 8th-round selection last year, currently in Single A? Obviously, it's early in his development, but do you have a projection on him moving forward?
So, Boston Baro, 8th-round pick last year. Mets paid him, I think, $500,000 over slot to sign him away from college. And one of the things they wanted him to do in his first offseason was to bulk up. And he did exactly that. When the Mets drafted him, he was like 170, 175. He's up over 190 pounds now. So he's a bigger, stronger kid. It's a line drive approach. The hope is if he can continue to physically mature, he could run into some home run power, but he's an up-the-middle, good athlete. And, most scouts think he probably is a best fit at second base or third base than shortstop. But they'll keep running him out at shortstop and kind of play him around the infield, but certainly a name to keep an eye on. And he made my top 30 list, so go check that out.
Before we close out our live show here from Citi Field for the Subway Series, and the fans rolling in.
Rolling in.
Fired up, ready to go. It's got a, I'm not going to say playoff atmosphere.
But it has a big game feel.
Big game feel.
Yeah,
right.
And that is big because 2-3 weeks ago, it was one of those things I was just like, the Subway Series, the Mets aren't playing well, Yankees are rolling, this ain't going to be so good. But now that the tides have turned a little bit, it has that big game feel.
Before we do close our live show here, Joe, let's do a little bonus down on the farm because everybody's always wondering what's going on with the pitching. We've talked a lot of Christian Scott today. We obviously talked about Acuna at Syracuse, but back to the pitching, Tidwell, Sproat, Vassell, Cowboy Ohtani. Yeah. Anybody really on a big stretch right now, Joe, where you see them rocketing upwards?
I mean, I don't see, honestly, any of those
Cowboys already got promoted.
Yeah, I don't see. I think Sproat and Cowboy Ohtani, Nolan McLean will probably spend the rest of the year with AA Binghamton, maybe get a start at the end at Syracuse just to get a taste.
They like to do that.
Yeah, they like to do that. But I don't think that any of those guys are coming up to impact the big league team this year. But Brandon Sproat is one of the best player development stories in the Mets system. He's a guy that when the Mets drafted him last year in the second round out of the University of Florida, there was a lot of questions about his pitch shape and, will his fastball play? And let me tell you, the fastball plays. It's up to 101 miles an hour. He has a sweeper, a cutter, a curveball, split change. Brandon Sproat has gone from a second-round pick with a lot of questions to a top 100 prospect in baseball and the number 7th-ranked prospect in my latest update that you could see at SNY.TV.
The top 30, folks.
Top 30. Go check it out. It was a lot of words, so go check it out.
Do we get to a world where you can crank out a top 50? Or are we just getting to names that have never played even in the system?
Don't give SNY any ideas.
Yeah, you heard it here first. Content machine. We did get one more from YouTube rolling in. This is from Armand. Would the Mets take on Chris Bassitt's deal? He's owed $22 million next year to also get a bullpen arm from the Blue Jays.
Is Chris Bassitt a bad contract? I mean, I'm not exactly following Chris Bassitt avidly, but I feel like he's probably pitching just fine.
For a team that always want to compete.
The Blue Jays are in a tricky spot. They're playing some bad baseball, and, there's a lot of words of Vlad Guerrero and Bo Bichette and guys like that potentially being on the move. I honestly, maybe this is a little hot take. I don't think the Mets need to go get a starting pitcher at the trade deadline. I think they have enough depth and pitchers to get through it, so I don't think they need to.
This won't shock you, Joe. Chris Bassitt last year, 3.6 ERA, 8.37 strikeout over 9.
Yeah.
Chris Bassitt this year, 3.45 ERA, 8.18 strikeout over 9. He's just the same guy.
Chris Bassitt is Chris Bassitt.
Worth a lot of money
Yeah.
in this league.
Especially with the dearth of pitchers being able to throw innings. Chris Bassitt's one of just a handful of guys that threw like 190 innings plus last year.
Our producer Jeff wants me to really rile up the crowd with Juan Soto talk, but
God.
I just don't know if I'm ready to go there, Joe.
It's a little early for the Juan Soto talk, but
Let's let the teams actually play.
You know what? Maybe there'll be a Mets fan chant here at Citi Field tonight. Come to Queens. Come to.
And Yankee fans shouting right back, please no.
Isn't that what the Subway Series is
That's
all
what
about?
it's all about.
Yeah, so look, I mean, we could rile up everybody about Juan Soto, and sure, when we get there and we love our off-season shows, we'll be talking about Juan Soto so much it'll make your ears bleed a little bit.
All right, legitimately, our last question. And
Okay.
thank you to everybody.
Yes,
Even
thank
if you
you.
couldn't be here, thank you for watching on YouTube and keeping the questions rolling in. AJ Rivera did exactly that. If the Mets are buying, who are some players y'all are keeping your eyes on? Like we've kind of hinted at, Joe, it's not a big name necessarily. I think it's kind of improving on the margins. And we see now with the Edwin Diaz suspension, this bullpen got thin really, really quickly. Brooks Raley's injury, you can't predict something like that. A lot of different guys have been hurt. Sean Reed-Foley back on the IL. I could see Stearns getting creative with a guy he values more out of the pen that another team doesn't. I don't know how much they'll actually do for everyday players right now because they're log-jammed in some places, and they like some of the depth they have in Syracuse that would be ready by then. I mean, another outfield injury, you hope in 5-6 weeks Drew Gilbert could potentially be a name you're talking about at least.
Yeah, I think it would be a lot of moves at the margins. I think the bullpen would certainly be the top priority. Like, Diaz is out for 10 games, and we don't know who's closing games for these next 10
Not
games.
trade first starter.
Yeah, I don't think they need to trade first starter. You know, I think Stearns is going to find, like you said, one of those guys that he values different than the market. Because everyone's just going to talk about Tanner Scott, the closer for the Marlins that's pitched fantastic this year, and he's probably going to net a big return for Miami. And that doesn't feel like something Stearns will go for. A guy like a Yimi Garcia, we're talking about Toronto. Maybe that's someone that could be of interest. And then, backup outfielder. We talk about Tyrone Taylor and DJ Stewart. Can you improve on one of those guys at the trade deadline while not losing a prospect of significance?
All right, Joe, Mets Yankees, we're getting closer and closer to first pitch. Closing thoughts on today's episode live right in front of the Apple next to the glorious Cadillac Lyric.
Thank you, everyone, for coming out, and really appreciate the support. Took a couple pictures, and really appreciate it. Yeah,
you know what? Let me say this: the Yankee fans have been.
They've been all right. We just got
they've been okay.
We got the
JD
Davis guy. That was it.
Well, I mean, he's a proud JD Davis fan.
And you know what?
First day of the Yankees.
We always shout them out. We're going to shout out our Mets fans from the UK. There's a fan here from the UK for the Subway Series, and
what
he came
a game
up,
to come to.
Yeah, what a game to come to. But yeah, this is a big game feel, and let's go Mets.
There we go. All right, this is the Mets Pod presented by Tri-State Cadillac. Visit your Tri-State Cadillac dealer today. Remember to subscribe to the show, Apple Podcasts, Spotify. You can watch every episode on SNY's YouTube channel, like today's show. You can leave a mailbag question there. We'll find them there. We'll find them on Apple Podcast reviews, of course. Thanks so much, everybody. We'll catch you next week.